Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to today's video. Today we are going to be discussing my 24 non-negotiables for 2024. These are the 24 books I absolutely have to read in 2024. These are my priority books and I'm gonna try my best to stick to this TBR. I only have 2 new releases on this list because these are new releases I know I really want to read, whereas others are not as important to me. So I'm gonna go in and start with the new releases since I only have 2. The first one is Magnolia Parks 3 Into the Dark, that is coming out February 13th. With everything that's on this list, this one is my #1 book that I want to read this year. I have talked about the Magnolia Parks universe so many times on this channel. It is near and dear to my heart, so I'm looking forward to reading the next one. So many people have gotten the arc for this book and have rated it 5 stars. I haven't seen a negative review for this book yet, so I'm not gonna lie, my expectations are kind of high and I'm trying to keep them down just in case. Really looking forward to that book. I can't wait till it comes out. The second book is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I have read I think all of Emily Henry's most popular books. I really enjoyed Happy Place, so I'm looking forward to seeing another new release from her. I want to see how her writing style is because I found that her writing style in Happy Place compared to the other books was very different, and I have no idea what the book is about, but I know when that book comes out I'm going to want to read it. I'm hoping it lives up to Happy Place, but we will see. So now into the books that are not really new releases. First things first, I'm going to start with Throne of Glass. As you may know, I'm in the middle of the Throne of Glass series, so I am currently doing the tandem read. Once I'm done the tandem read, I'm going to want to immediately go into Kingdom of Ash, which is the final book in the Throne of Glass series. I am terrified and excited. I've heard that this book is going to break my heart from beginning to end, and I'm scared, but I'm really looking forward to reading this. I have to finish this series to start my next one, and that is Crescent City. So I decided that I wanted to finish the Throne of Glass series before getting into Crescent City. I really wanted to finish every single Sarah J Maas book before her new release, which is actually coming out in a few days, and that's the 3rd book in the Crescent City series. But I'm clearly not going to. It's an urban fantasy, so it takes place in modern times with fantasy elements. So I think they drive cars and use cell phones and go to clubs and things like that. I'm really looking forward to reading an urban fantasy because pretty much every fantasy I've read is more in like medieval type of times or just like olden days. Really looking forward to this one. I've been dying to read it, but I just really want to get through Throne of Glass first. Another on my list is finishing the Once Upon a Broken Heart series by Stephanie Garber, and this is the 3rd and final book in the trilogy, A Curse for True Love. I said I was going to read this when it first came out. I went to the store on release day and bought this book back in October and never ended up getting to it. And honestly, the cover just, it's so pretty, so I want to read it even more just because of how it looks. But I do think I have to be in the mood for this because it is a more whimsical, it's very magical type of fantasy. It's not like action-packed. I don't know, it's just very fairy tale like. It's not like most fantasies that I read, so I really need to be in the mood for something like this. So next on my list is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This is a duology that was highly talked about last year. It is, from what I've heard, more of a gothic fantasy. I don't really know what to expect from that because I don't think I've ever read a gothic fantasy. I just hear it can be very dark and eerie, but I am really looking forward to reading a fantasy series that's a duology and not like a full-length series with like 5 to 8 books. I'm looking forward to something that's just kept short, kind of gets straight to the point and just ends instead of continuing for a really long time. Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge series girl. I love reading series, but I am looking forward to kind of just having 2 books to read. Next I have These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, which was actually on my fall TBR where I was saying I have to read it before the year ends, and I just didn't. This is actually a duology, and I think this follows the same world as Chloe Gong's Foul Lady Fortune. This is actually a Romeo and Juliet retelling. It takes place in Shanghai, I believe. Next I have Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. Really want to read this book. One of my goals this year is to find more fantasies by Black authors. I've been dying to read it for a while. I don't know one thing about this book, but I've heard such good things. All right, now this one is one that is going to take up a ton of my time. I don't think I'm going to be able to get through this entire universe this year, but I'm hoping to get through a good amount of it this year because it will take a long time. It is the Shadowhunters universe. So right now I have City of Bones. I actually had this book when I was a teenager, and I read like, I don't even think I read half of this book. I am going to be 28 soon, and I've had this book since I was in high school. I am really interested in Cassandra Clare's entire Shadowhunters universe. I believe there are 3 or 4 different series to follow if you want to follow the entire thing. This series is the Mortal Instruments, so I have 2 books from this one. I also do have the first book from the Last Hours trilogy, and this is Chain of Gold. I bought it because I found it at a thrift store in perfect condition and I didn't want to pass up on it. With Cassandra Clare, there's the same thing with Sarah J Maas and some other fantasy writers where there are all these different reading orders. So I'm still trying to figure out which reading order I want to do. So there's the Infernal Devices, the Last Hours, and then we have the Mortal Instruments. There may be another one, I'm not entirely sure. But this one I believe takes place after every single one of them, but I do think it was written first. This is actually another urban fantasy. This takes place in modern times with cars and cell phones and all of that. I don't think I'm gonna get through the entire thing this year, but I'm very determined to start this whole universe, at least start it. So next I have the From Blood and Ash series. I do only have 3 of the books. I think this is a fantasy romance about vampires. So this is why I haven't gotten into it yet. I am not entirely sure if I'm going to be a vampire girly. I was a Twilight girl when I was in middle school, but I don't know how I'm going to feel about that as an adult. Jennifer Armentrout and her series are another one of those whole universes you have to follow. I think she has a whole other universe that's more of like a prequel. There's even another reading order that's out now. We'll see how I feel about this one, but I do really like the cover. Next, I have 2 Olivia Blake books on here. I haven't read any Olivia Blake books yet, and I really want to read her books. I've heard such good things. I've heard her writing is amazing. The first one I've had on my TBR for a really long time now, and that's Alone with You in the Ether. I don't know anything about this book. I've heard it breaks people's heart, I'm pretty sure. I've heard a lot of people say it's like such an emotional and such a good book. Her other one is One for My Enemy, which is another like Romeo and Juliet retelling. So I want to see how I like Olivia Blake's writing. By the way, I don't know if Alone with You in the Ether is even a fantasy, but One for My Enemy is a fantasy, I believe. I just wanted to put Olivia Blake in this one category. Next, I have The Crown of Nyaxia series. This is by Carissa Broadbent, and the first book is The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I mentioned in the past that I actually DNF'd this book at like 11%. I just couldn't bring myself to get into it, but I think I just have to be in the right headspace to read this. This is actually another vampire fantasy romance. I know that it follows a similar like Hunger Games vibe with trials and a human girl who lives amongst vampires. I really do want to read that series, or at least get to the first one sometime this year. Next, I have Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. I read Divine Rivals last year. I love Rebecca Ross's writing. It's very beautiful. So next I have Shatter Me, another really long series. This is actually dystopian. This is about a girl whose touch, I think her touch kills people. She has a fatal touch, and the reestablishment, which I'm assuming is like the government, want to keep her captive for their benefit. This is a really long series. This is how many books there are. I don't even know if that's all of them, but I do really want to at least read the first one to see how I feel about it. It just feels like a huge commitment to get into. This is the last fantasy I have on my list, and it is called Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. I have heard such amazing things about this series. I think there are 4 books, the last one coming out in March, I believe. I don't know anything about this series, but I have heard amazing things that I just feel like I can't miss out on it. Now for my romance books. Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. I've heard so many people say that if you love Magnolia Park that you will really like this series, but I do think Binding 13 is a YA book, and it's very, very, very long. So I'm just gonna stick to my Kindle if I'm reading that and that way I can't tell how long the book actually is. Next, I really want to read Honey and Spice by, correct me if I'm wrong, I may be saying this wrong, Balu Babalola. This is actually a black romance. Really been wanting to read this book for a really long time. This is about a black British woman who has no interest in love, but she does find herself in a fake relationship. I do want to read more black romance this year. If you guys have recommendations, definitely let me know. Then I have Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher. This might actually be my very next read. I have heard such good things about this book recently. It's a newer release. I think it came out in November. I've been seeing like practically only 5 stars for this book. You'll probably hear a review from me soon with this one. Then I have the final book in the Chestnut Spring series. I've read every single book except for the last one. I haven't shared any reviews on Reckless, but I do really want to read it and finish the series. Then I have the Addicted series by, I think it's Krista and Becca Ritchie, especially because it is now on Kindle Unlimited. I need to read it. I don't expect myself, if I enjoy the first book, to read the entire series this year because it's just a lot. And lastly, I have 3 general fiction books. I don't know which category or genre these 3 books fit in, but these are just like my general fiction, I guess you can say. First, I have Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, which I've been really wanting to read. I think I'm going to read it next month. I've heard that this book can feel kind of thrilling. This is about a girl named Athena, and when she dies, this other girl named June ends up stealing her unpublished manuscript and publishes it as her own. I'm thinking about starting it next month because, again, I've heard nothing but good things. And I also have another book that has the word yellow in the title, which is Yellowwife by Sadika Johnson. I read The House of Eve by Sadika Johnson and absolutely fell in love with that book. I loved her writing, so I do want to try another one of her books. This is actually about a woman who was born on a plantation. So she has a father who is actually a slave owner. She was promised freedom when she turns 18, but then her father ends up sending her to a jail where slaves are tortured and sold every single day. She ends up being forced to become the mistress of a jail owner. I do really want to read it this year, but I do know I have to be in the right headspace to read something like that. Lastly, I have Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson, and I actually think this was one of the first books I put on my Goodreads when I started reusing Goodreads again. So I've been wanting to read this book for a while. This one is about a woman who leaves behind an inheritance to her 2 children when she dies, and it's actually a black cake recipe, and these 2 siblings are trying to figure out a lot about their mother's past. I could be really wrong about that plot, but this is just based off what I remember reading about it. I've heard really good things. Again, like, I'd really like to read this book, especially since it's been on my TBR for a really long time. I think this year will be a lot of fantasy, but I think that I will have a decent amount of different reads this year compared to last year. Those are my 24 non-negotiables for 2024, the 24 books I have to read this year. I would really like next year to look back at this video and see which ones I actually did read. So let's see how this year goes. Wish me good luck. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you guys have read any of these books, please let me know what you think of them. Maybe it will motivate me to read some of them too. If you like this video, please don't forget to give it a like, and if you're not subscribed, do not forget to subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video.